Right. I was just going to keep admitting folk as they appear, because like there'll still be a few people coming in. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us again. The next of our virtual series. I got a nice little break last week where Scott took the helm and steered the ship as we had the pirate session, which I think was a lot of fun. So tonight, this evening, we're delighted to welcome Dave back for the second in his mini-series with us. So I'll hand over to Dave shortly, so just the usual formalities before we get started. Welcome to you all. And if this is your first time, warm welcome to you. If you've been with us before, welcome back. We do have a code of conduct, so do please familiarise yourself with that. In short, we ask that you be respectful to one another. We want everyone to have a harassment-free experience. We do have a detailed code of conduct that you can read on Hive, or it's also in Meetup, so do please familiarise yourself with that if you've not already done so. We will do community shout-outs at the end, just in the remaining 5 minutes or so. And in terms of the Q&A, we'll take our sort of standard approach that we've used in a lot of these virtual sessions, where if you do have questions over the course of the session, as Dave's going through his content, then do feel free to add questions into the chat. If you could prefix them with a Q, it makes it easier for the team and I to spot them. And Babs is going to lead us through the Q&A this evening, so she will facilitate that. And I think that's the formalities. So and Dave Snowden's our guest speaker tonight, known to many of us. Did a session for us in the previous month. Excellent session it was too. And we're just going to build on some of the ideas that Dave covered in that session. So we're going to take a little bit more of a deep dive on some of the sort of architectural type considerations when looking in this sort of complexity space and align it to some of what's going on. We did have a great Q&A last time, so yeah, do keep the questions coming, and I'm sure Dave will be more than happy to answer them. Dave's bio is in our meetup, so if you'd like to know more about Dave's career and all the various things he's done, there's quite a lot of info in there. There's so much to cover off. I'll let you digest that yourself. So he is the Chief Scientific Officer at Cognitive Edge, and also the founder of the Cynefin framework, which you may well be familiar with. And with that, I'll hand over to, sorry Dave, I'll hand over to Dave to take you through the session. Dave, welcome back.
Hi, good to be here. And just by way of note, Cynefin is 21 years old this October.
Wow.
We found that by accident. Yeah, 21 years old. 1999 is the first publication.
Well, congratulations.
First use of the name. So we're planning something for that. I feel a sort of coming of age party.
Sounds brilliant. Sounds brilliant.
Okay, so last time I was talking about the new approach we've been developing on crisis management, which feeds off Cynefin. That's a joint production between European Policy Lab and the Cynefin Centre. The idea this time is to talk about some of the more, shall we say, uncertain thinking, i.e. this is early stage thinking about architecture. Now this has come off a series of things which have been going on. One is for the last, in 2018 and 19, we ran a series of retreats, and this is something the Cynefin Centre does. So I'll just explain the background. We run retreats and we run exploratories. So exploratories seek to combine Cynefin ideas with other people's ideas. So I've done them with Simon Wardley. So we've got a Cynefin Wardley mapping process, which is now run twice, with great effect. We've run one with theory of constraints. We've run with OODA. So the concept there is these things have evolved. They have different backgrounds, but they're compatible in different ways. So how do we combine? So those have been going on for some time now. And there's 3 more planned for this year. Whether they'll be physical or virtual is an open question. The other big thing we do, and this is the more primary discovery, is what are called retreats. And that's when we bring together 3 or 4 academics from different backgrounds who have knowledge relevant to the subject area. And there's a whole facilitation method here called a tricopticon. Just to give you an idea, the 3 academics, one presents, the other 2 respond. And then the audience split into smaller groups of 3, they all disappear, they have conversation. And then one of each 3, called a raven, then sits in a circle. They discuss what the academic said, and the academics can't respond. And then we rotate that 3 times. So over a day and a half, everybody is a presenter and a discussant, and everybody also has to listen. And then we do the synthesis. So it's a well-developed process. So one of the big things we worked on last year and the year before was design thinking. And we had people like Anne Pendleton-Julie in there. If you haven't read her 2-stage book, Design Unbound, with John Seeley Brown, I strongly recommend it. And one of the reasons we did that is that design thinking has just entered its industrialization phase, the same way as Agile has. And the way you know that something has become industrialized is where it becomes a commodity. And you can see that Ideo are doing exactly the same thing with design thinking that most Agile people do with training. It's now training, certificates, online process. Yeah? And when something gets commoditized, that's when you introduce something new. So if you remember, hardware became a commodity. IBM didn't realize, software took over. Software became a commodity. Microsoft didn't realize, Apple took over. This is kind of like a successive cycle. When something becomes a commodity, it's time for novelty to be introduced. So that's what we started working on. The other reason for that is most professors of design are really upset by what's happened with design thinking, which was really created by management consultants, and it's a highly linear process. Right? Now, just want to address this for a bit. Design thinking became linear, so kind of like we go out and we interview these people. We call it ethnography. It isn't. It's just unstructured interviewing. Then we pull them all together into a workshop, and then the bright guys go away and come up with all these ideas, and then we produce a product. So it's ethnography, ideation, product, and you can see that in the method. It's drawn as a double diamond, which you'll all be familiar with, but fundamentally it's a linear process. So what we were interested in was non-linear approaches to design. Right? Now, I'll take this at a high level and come back to architecture because I need to build on this. One of the things we started to look at was the difference between articulated and unarticulated need. Now, this is of major importance for the IT profession because technology is moving faster than users know what to ask for. So one of the things which actually happened in Snowbird was people said we should orient more towards users. And the reality is it's kind of like a mixture of the two. When I was designing systems, one of the adages we had is that users never know what they want until you give it them, and then they want something different, which is why alcohol was a key part of user interaction when I was designing systems you needed to recover. Yeah. Now, the reality is that actually users are bound by what they currently understand is possible. Yeah? So one of the things we're starting to do is to say what you need to do is to map unarticulated needs of users, because if you can actually provide existing capability to unarticulated need, you can actually make radical improvements very, very quickly. So this is also about switching IT from a linear process of user executives creating a backlog, people clearing the backlog, the architect being the only one who worries about the integration, and the manufacturing metaphor, which goes with that linear flow type model, is problematic because it assumes the definition phase is right. Yeah? Now the reality is, and this is in Cynefin terms, if you're in ordered domains, users know what they want. In complex domains, users don't know what they want. So we started to develop methods for unarticulated need mapping. Yeah? And I'll give you a couple of examples on that. Yeah. One is the use of trios. You'll remember we also use this approach in the crisis management. But in IT, one of the ways we do it is to say, basically, what you do is you put 3 people together. One is sort of young, naive, really good programmer, bright mathematician, whatever, fast prototyper. One is somebody who sees the system as a whole. So that could be a systems architect or an end system tester. Testers often have a better vision of the whole system than the architects do in some ways. And they tend to think in anticipatory ways. If you bring testing into design, people start to design with a view to making testing and scaling easier. So there's some advantages on that. And the third thing, and this has been a lot of fun developing, is I gave up trying to train IT people to understand users. So I thought, hang on a minute, why don't we do it the other way around, is train users to talk to IT people. And it's a lot easier. So what you do is you put three people together, a user who's been trained to talk to IT people, young, bright, mathematical, older, more experienced, the whole system. And you throw 15 trios at a problem for a week and ask them to come up with prototypes. You don't send in a systems analyst. So what I'm doing is I'm radically increasing diversity in the capture phase for requirements and avoiding the pattern trainment which comes with systems analyst. The other one is a method I developed when we set up the DSDM consortium many years ago. I was one of the three people who set that up. We had dinner at a pub in Cheltenham. We didn't go to a fancy ski resort, but we were British, not American. And we also, three competitive companies, agreed to work together to create a standard rather than one of us trying to create it. Yeah. Now, one of the methods I created in that was called 888. So we did a lot of work with DSDM with JAD, which is a neglected process in Agile, joint application design. And we're doing a lot of work still with JAD. Right? So basically a JAD session runs over a day. It's highly interactive. You have specialist technical staff who are good at prototyping. They can throw things together very quickly to test understanding. Originally developed by IBM, but never fully exploited. It was one of the many things which came out of IBM Canada. So we'd run a JAD session in Farnborough with a bunch of users, and we'd create a set of prototypes. And then we chuck the prototypes across to a team in Mumbai and say, improve it. But we wouldn't give them access to the original user requirement. All they saw is what we produced from the JAD session. And then after another 8 hours, they threw it to a team in San Jose who had the same instruction. And 8 hours later, it came back into the UK. So what we had is, in a highly compressed environment, 2 mutations. There's a game in the UK, I mean, we all know it in the UK, but we've got people from outside called Chinese whispers, which is a bit racist as a phrase. But you whisper into one kid whispers into an ear, they whisper into another ear. And the point is the message changes when you go through it. So we were introducing mutation deliberately. And every time we've run that over the years, users basically say, God, I wouldn't have thought of that. Can I please have it? Yeah. Now, those are examples. Yeah, telephone game, that's it. Now, those are examples of new ways of getting needs articulated. Yeah, by deliberately introducing diversity and not using the cognitive bias of a systems analyst. So that was one thing. The other thing we then focused on was distributed ideation. So the generation of ideas for improvement over large populations. And that led us into the very interesting work. This is based around exaptation, which I explained last time, which is the biological process by which a trait which evolves for one function under conditions of stress doesn't adapt, it exapts. So the two classic examples on this are dinosaurs' feathers evolved for sexual display, and then dinosaurs with a lot of feathers some develop wing flaps, or rather fall-in flaps, because they can better display sexually. Those fall off trees, we get flight. Yeah, you wouldn't get it in a linear way, because if dinosaurs threw themselves off cliffs in the hope that they would evolve feathers before they hit the ground, they wouldn't survive to breed. So a trait which developed for one function under conditions of stress exapts for something completely different. Yeah. Now, that's a very important concept in modern technology. So, for example, microwave ovens can arise because somebody happens to notice a chocolate bar melts in their pocket when they're maintaining the magnet of a radar machine. They realize the significance, and bang, you get microwave ovens. If you look at Apple's design over the years, they're masters at exaptation. They take highly developed technologies and then they repurpose them for things that people don't yet know what they need. And that was Apple's whole strategy. So one of the key things we've been developing on this is the basic concept of how do you repurpose things that you were already highly competent at to actually meet unarticulated needs of users. And that's a kind of like exaptive type architecture in that sense. You're trying to break away from a linear process to create a non-linear way. So that exaptive concept is one key principle or issue. The other key thing which came out of that process is the concept of scaffolding. Now, this is a type of constraint in complexity theory. And let me go, I'm going to go through a rough typology of scaffolding, but first of all, I'll create a couple of taxonomies. If you don't know the difference between taxonomy and typology, then you need to work on this. Yeah. So a taxonomy puts things into categories. Yeah, and it basically says this is one of these or this is one of those. And that's very powerful because then you know what to do. The trouble with taxonomies is boundary conditions. So when you hit a boundary condition, there's ambiguity, you may put it into the wrong box. A typology is a way of looking at things from different perspectives so that you can identify patterns. So typologies, and Cynefin is a typology which can also be used as a taxonomy, but that's a separate issue. So there's a couple of key distinctions in understanding scaffolding. Scaffolding can be an endoskeleton or an exoskeleton. Yeah. So an exoskeleton is like an insect. It has an external skeleton, and that means it's restricted in how big it can grow. All these films about giant ants are not possible within Earth's gravity. I think the biggest something with an external skeleton can get to is about 1 meter or 2 meters or something like that. Yeah. And within species, you don't get much variety. On the other hand, mammals, for example, have an endoskeleton, an internal skeleton, which gives us a coherent structure, but allows a huge amount of variety around the structure. Yeah, so you've got the rough shape and we can grow much bigger. And dinosaurs have an endoskeleton as well. So one distinction is the thing externally bound or is it internally connected? So it's a difference between a container and a mechanism for connection. Right, so that's one key principle. And so, for example, in some of the work we're doing on software design at the moment, we're using timelines of people and objects, effectively as an internal scaffolding, an internal structure around which things can interact. So that's one key distinction. The other distinction is whether scaffolding is resilient or whether it's robust. Now, this is some of the most misused words in the English language, so everybody has different definitions, so I'll give you mine. A robust system is one which is brilliant until it breaks, and then you wish it wasn't there. So if you want a metaphor for this, think about a seawall, or a river bank, all right? It's rigid, you know what it is, it's highly efficient. You can basically drain the landward side and you can increase crop-in, fertilization, all that sort of good thing, until the day the design conditions are exceeded. And at that point, you wish the dam hadn't been there in the first place because the break is always catastrophic. You compare that with a salt marsh. Yeah. In a salt marsh, basically you've got a huge amount of water can be absorbed. It consumes land which can no longer be made agricultural. It's constantly mutating and changing with successive floods. But once it reaches its capacity, it doesn't release the original water. The break isn't catastrophic. Yeah. So a resilient system is one which survives with continuity of identity over time. Yeah, so you can see the pattern of change. And from my point of view, what Taleb calls an anti-fragile system is actually a type of resilience. And we knew about it long before Taleb thought of it. But say different people use different language for this. So so I've got internal or external, I've got resilient or robust. And the basic concept we're starting to move to, and this applies to organizational design as well as software, is you don't decide what the system should be, you decide what sort of scaffolding you want first. And that links to the degree of uncertainty. So again, if I move into the typology, another way of looking at this is if you have bamboo or steel scaffolding, then you know what sort of building you want to make. On the other hand, if you have some of the mitochondrial stuff, so if you have a really bad burn, what will happen is they'll lay a nutrient lattice over the burn, which provides a structure for the skin to regrow, but the nutrient disappears into the skin when it's there. Yeah, there are also lattices which can go into your heart with these electrical filaments and so on. And then you get extreme forms of scaffolding, what's called a dark scaffolding. This is what Anne talks about in the book, which is the whole extreme sports, where you need to evolve multiple things over a decade or so before you can have extreme sports. It's not something you can design up front. The technology has to develop, the practice has to develop, the training has to develop, it takes time. So one of the first questions that you start to ask when you're designing any type of system is not actually what does the system need to look like at the end, not what the goals are. This is why I don't like things like epics, but actually what level of uncertainty do we have to handle, and therefore what type of scaffolding do we need to build? Right? Now I'm going to leave that one question hanging. I say we're exploring this. The other thing is I've actually dragged out a lot of my old object orientation textbooks. I was on Corba committees back in the 80s and 90s, right? Because what we're now starting to say, and I'm going to throw this out as an idea, say a couple more things, then stop for a bit for a conversation, then start again, is what we're starting to say is that in a modern organization, people are objects too. So software can be objects, people can be objects, they have inheritance, they have polymorphism, they have interactions. And therefore, when you do a design, you start off by deciding what type of scaffolding you want, you build the scaffolding, and then you define interactions around the scaffolding so that the application emerges as people actually use the system. So effectively, you're creating sufficient structure for an evolutionary process. So applications become emergent properties of the interaction of people and software over time, either within or around a different type of scaffolding or a structure. And that's the broad conceptual idea. Now, as I say, the next generation of SenseMaker has been designed entirely on these principles, and I'm limited in what I can say about that. But it also brings in the other thing I want to do, and then I'm going to stop, which is the concept of entanglement. Now, this is a key complexity idea. So one of the ways that Alicia Giraro describes a complex adaptive system is she says it's like bramble bushes in a thicket. Yeah, and everything is entangled with everything else, so you can't separate it. Right? Now, that's kind of like what you often face in an organization. What we're now starting to do is say, well, we actually know entanglement is extremely useful because things connect in novel ways. Therefore, what we need to do is to deliberately entangle different things. So in the big system we're currently building on old people's homes management, we're actually able to entangle relatives, carers, blood pressure machines, it doesn't matter. Anything which has any type of agency or function within the system has its own timeline, that's its architecture. And then I can entangle the timelines to see different patterns or different reportings. So I'm not actually, what I'm doing up front is designing interactions around the scaffolding. I'm not designing what people will actually get. Yeah, and under those circumstances, epics and story points and everything else become deeply problematic. Now, that was a fairly conceptual presentation, all right? And I warned you, this is an area of exploration at the moment. But to me, the one big missing piece in Agile at the moment is the concept of architecture. And people aren't really breaking away from, that they say, I forgot what it's called now, right? But I mean, every time anybody works on architecture, they end up drawing boxes with arrows and feedback loops. It's almost like they can't get away from it, right? I'm trying to think of architecture as more like a biological model or biological framework or a network model. in which I manage the stability through scaffolding and interaction design, but I don't actually worry about what happens, because if I interact around the scaffolding, I've got risk-free software development because novelty can emerge from the process. At that point, stop, discussion, questions. I've got some things to finish off on, but I thought I'd get that far and then stop. And if somebody wants to try and shoot me down in flames, I'd be grateful, because I'm still working this one through.
See how we're doing with the questions. Thanks for that. Good point to take a pause. Babs, have we got any interesting questions for Dave?
There's none come up so far. So guys, the floor is open. Do you want to type in any questions you've got? Oh.
I've got a thought or a question, Dave, which is, what's the overlap here with Bruno Latour and actor network theory?
Oh, that one comes up from time to time. Actor network theory is one of those things which I think if they'd known about complexity theory, they'd have written something different. But there's a lot we can take across from it.
Well, they came from a different discipline and independently discovered a whole bunch of things of interest that we would relabel in different ways in complex adaptive systems, etc. But a lot of what you've talked about, I think, has parallels, and perhaps there's lessons to import from them.
There is, and I've got books by Latour on the shelf behind me and everything else, all right? So it's the same way as we learned from people like Stafford Beer. So VSM is interesting, all right? But Beer didn't have complexity theory available to him, right? So I think, all is, I won't say standing on the shoulders of giants, because I actually know the origin of that phrase. If you don't know it, Newton hated Boyle. So every time somebody said his ideas were derivative of Boyle, he finally said, I have stood on the shoulders of giants, because Boyle was a dwarf. So he was the origin of that is actually,
no, I didn't know that.
No, it's a savage attack on Boyle, all right? And people have misused it ever since. So I think yes, and I think Latour is key on this, all right? But I think, and we've been influenced by that, but the basic complexity concept is that things are defined by interactions. And the other issue is the sort of concept of fractality and entanglement is also key, all right? And that gives you a much more sophisticated way of thinking about it.
Thanks.
Everyone's very shy this evening with their questions. Anyone else got any burning questions at the moment?
No wonder why I put Hooker. I was suggesting maybe it was Hooker that Newton didn't like. I wasn't actually making a rude comment.
Dave, I second Ian's question there. Sorry, I was going to say I second Ian's question there. The epics and the user stories and so on being problematic. I'd be very interested in knowing a bit more about that.
Say that again, Sterling.
So the epics and user story points being problematic.
I think there are several reasons, all right? One is, I'm take this with a pinch of salt or even a whole salt cellar. I'm sort of on a mission to get rid of systems analysts, right? Because I think they're 90% of the problem. Right? So if you look at inattentional blindness, right, this is a famous thing. If you give radiologists a batch of x-rays, final picture, you put a picture of a gorilla, then 80 to 83% don't see it even though their eyes scan it, right? That invalidates the whole concept of a systems analyst interviewing people, because also analysts come from quite a narrow background. So to give an example on this, and that this is a tale that I don't feel guilty about this, although I think I probably should feel guilty, right? But when I was programming, it was 3 and 4 GLs. And I'd actually been an accountant. If you don't know this, I've been a HR manager and an accountant in my life. I try and keep these things quiet. And I got told off for excessive focus on profit and not being creative enough. So I took that appraisal seriously, right? So either way, I didn't know that people with accounting qualifications who could also write computer code were very rare people back in the 80s. So I got a job in a company called DataSolve. I didn't have any idea that they'd spent 2 years trying to find somebody like me. I thought I was competing with other people for the job. I could have got a lot more money if I'd realized it, right? But basically, and I'll never forget this, because they'd sold me as an expert in a high-level language, which I'd never programmed in my life before. So I had to get the user to agree they wanted something completely different to give me time to use the language. I mean, this is basic skill sets, right? Then I realized the users had no bloody idea what the technology could do for them. And this is 2 big users. One is Guinness Group worldwide, all right? That was one of the groups I was working with, all right? They had no idea what computers could do because they were all in manual processes. So basically, I wrote what I thought they needed, and I got away with it. Yeah, that got me promoted. And if I'd listened to what they wanted, it would have been a waste of time. Yeah. The other thing is, I realized, and I got honest about this, I had 5 clients I did this with, all right? This is why I was the most profitable business unit in the whole company for 8 years running. Yeah. So basically, we went to these people, we were building financial consolidation and reporting systems. And we said, look, we can write this stuff with parameters, at which point, if you change your mind next year, we can make changes, but it will cost you an extra 15%. And they always said, no, we don't want it. So we go away and write it with parameters. Yeah, next year, they'd come around and say, oh, we've changed. So we say, well, it's a complete rebuild. So we change some parameters, wait 3 months and get them to test it and charge them for a rebuild. And I eventually got caught on this because the financial director of Thorny MI became the financial director of the company. And he called me in one day and he said, I need to know how you made this profit. And he said, why is it that McKinsey's are saying I should invest in you and not expect any return for the next 4 years? And I said, McKinsey's is easy. I've read their website. I know what their theory is. So I knew how to answer their questions. So I'd be in the right-hand box of the matrix. And he looked at me appalled and said, has anybody else done that? I said, I don't think so. And then I told him the truth about what I'd done to him for the last 8 years. And he removed me from business management and put me into corporate strategy. All right. So that was a sort of lesson on that. Right. But I think the big thing I learned on that is that we need this active, we actually need to start. That's why I'm training users to talk to IT people, because the background of IT people now is actually very narrow. They generally don't have user experience. Yeah, they're often kids who've coded. They've lived in a particular environment. And they have a real problem because all coders are to some extent towards the autistic end of the spectrum. Otherwise, they wouldn't be good coders. Whereas they're dealing with people who are, for example, dyslexic or think in radically different ways. So they often overstructure things or try and force people into definitions that actually aren't what they actually want. So that's where we're coming from on this. And I think story points and epics and all those sort of things make it worse, because they break a key principle of complexity theory, which is called disintermediation. So what we do is we gather user anecdotal data, we make it visual through fitness landscapes, and then the coders get direct access to the user anecdotes. It's not interpreted for them. Now that's really important, because coders can spot something in user anecdotes which may provide huge competitive advantage, but they won't see it if that gets synthesized first. And essentially want things to be a lot more messy. I'm not sure whether I answered the question or made it worse there, but that's the reason. Yeah. And you notice the other thing we're doing with trios is we're saying it's not about the individual. Human beings evolved to make decisions in extended families and in tribes, not as individuals. We're really poor as individuals. So getting people with different backgrounds to work together in parallel and to agree in competition, yeah, that actually makes whatever you produce far more resilient.
Is there a risk, Dave, in the trio that you don't have some kind of facilitator with the good comm skills to tie it all together? Because if you've got a young, clever, autistic developer and a user who doesn't understand stuff and a tester, they might not be able to communicate.
They've got the user as well who's trained to talk to both of them.
Okay, so yeah, he's trained.
Yeah, and
yep.
I mean, it's interesting. It's actually quite easy to train users to talk to IT people. We should do more of it. And it's very simple. It's kind of like, don't introduce more than one idea at a time. Make sure they've got it in their head. And this is a necessary skill, right? Users generally don't do that. They just keep throwing out ideas. So we overstructure it from an IT perspective. And the point is, you've got these groups working in parallel. So in Cynefin terms, that's complex. The things which at the end of it are useful go into the liminal domain, which is where you use things like Scrum. Right? So Scrum is a linear iteration which handles a lot of ambiguity. It's really good at that, but it's not good at the really ambiguous stuff. And that's where you need sort of what we call pre-Scrum techniques. Yeah, and the less facilitation, the better, because facilitators have their own bias.
So we had another question coming out saying, do you have thoughts about how to persuade people with power that using a gradual approach to design is more effective than upfronting everything? For example, a director thinks that requirements are Cynefin obvious because he's been in the domain for years, but people at the system front are convinced it's complex.
There's several ways. First of all, if you've got a good crisis, use it. Yeah. It's actually a problem now because the guys who really understand that in Britain at the moment are the bad guys, not the good guys. Yeah, and you can see that going on. Generally, bad guys are better at exploiting opportunities than good guys, right? Second is, don't try and persuade them. Demonstrate it. Yeah? If you can show a senior executive how existing capability can meet needs which haven't been fully articulated by their customers, they're going to be interested. Yeah? At the moment, IT is a manufacturing unit which responds to customer demand. So you're a cost, which is why people like me used to sell outsourcing. Yeah? What you need to be is strategic. So for example, some of the stuff we're doing with IT departments at the moment to use the whole of the workforce to provide situational assessment for executives. That can be done very quickly within discretionary spend, starts to show how IT can be a strategic tool, not just a response to demand. Yeah. So, and you know, the work we're doing at the moment, we've got a big post-COVID scenario planning exercise going on together with leadership journaling of lessons learned. And that's been paralleled in NHS Grampian as a set of experiments. That's going to go to the UN next week with a, here's something we've done, wouldn't you like to scale it? We don't go with, here's a wonderful idea about how to do things differently, would you like to fund it? Because they've been conned that way before. Yeah. So yeah, the last thing you do is try and persuade executives. You demonstrate capability that they want to fund scaling. You don't actually go in with a sort of, this is a wonderful new way of doing it. It never works.
So we've got another one here. Sorry, I missed it earlier. When you mean design, are you talking about the discovery ideation process? Judgeable, it could be useful here. Would not other methods like Scrum continue to be useful for non-discovery complicated work?
I think Scrum's great power is to make things which are borderline complicated. That's why we put it in the liminal domain of Cynefin. It's its great strength. Yeah. It can handle a degree of ambiguity, but it's a linear process. Right? Nothing wrong with that. Very powerful. Yeah. And this is my whole argument for years, is that we need to stop, you know, the Scrum, Kanban, SAFe type wars. All right. What you need is a multi-methods approach. Yeah, different methods with standard interfaces, rather than one, you know, one rule, one ring to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them. Yeah. Or one flow chart to rule them all and in the darkness bind them. Yeah? And I've never understood the fights between Kanban and Scrum. Never understood it, right? David's tried to explain it to me, and I remember saying, well, doubtless to sheep, other sheep appear different, or to shepherds, which is Tolkien's famous put down, right? The reality is, from an executive point of view, what you've got is, Agile is a very, IT is in a luxurious position. They have training budgets that no other department has got. Yeah, and they're soft. Yeah, they get loads of budgets for training, for certification. Yeah, and kind of like they're soft as a result. Other departments have had to narrow down, and that's going to come to IT soon, right, I think.
So going back to the user who can communicate to IT, Ian's asking, how do you select and train this user?
I think like most of these things, you need a degree of passion, right? I mean, if I'm honest, I'm repurposing so your child is autistic, has got Asperger's syndrome books, because I can just take that intact, right? But what you're basically doing is finding something and using and say, look, this is the way you communicate. You give them some simple heuristics and some simple forms, because the whole function of IT is to structure things which are currently unstructured. I'm not being negative or positive here. If you don't structure it to a certain point, you can't write code. But the users are all over the place in blah, 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 like that. Yeah. So the issue is partial communication. Now, I learned this myself, to be honest, internally, because I'm the only person in Cognitive Edge at a sort of management level who's actually got software development experience. So every time we have to explain something to the software people, I get to do it. Right? Because otherwise they end up, I mean, we had the meeting this morning, right? You know, 1 hour stand up on it, right? And I can almost hear the miscommunication, because the users are making all sorts of assumptions about the software engineer's knowledge of what they do, and they're not articulating them. Yeah? So you've got to find ways in which you get this common language, this common communication mechanism. And things like trios, and what I'm doing here is building it in the process. Things like trios do that. If some of the users can't communicate, well, it doesn't matter, because you've got 15 or 20 groups running. And it's a lot cheaper than sending out a systems analyst, and it's faster. Yeah.
Which ties in nicely to John's questions. So system analysts need to go because they are perceptual filters, or because they are conceptual filters?
No, I think they, it's sort of like we're trying to say at the moment to, that was weird. Well, I think we're trying to say to longitudinal researchers, and I'll give you the illustration on this, all right? So longitudinal researchers gather huge amounts of material, they transcribe it, then they go through and tag it. I mean, why they do this, I don't know. It's boring as all hell, yeah? What we can do with SenseMaker is people self-tag their own material, and then the longitudinal researcher can now look at patterns, so they can do a more intelligent function. But they don't do the primary collection because they get cognitive bias. And that's the same switch we need with systems analysts, is switching from doing primary collection, which they favor, into analyzing patterns in data collected and self-interpreted by users. Right? And that's what we do with fitness landscapes and all those sort of things. So it's you really want that expertise at the sort of final structuring stage, but not the initial structuring stage. And in complexity, systems analysts are always subject to premature convergence, and there is no sexual innuendo in that, but I'm prepared to work on it if you want, right? In that they converge too quickly on a solution, yeah, rather than allowing things to stay open. I'm watching ordinary people at the moment, all right? I'm catching up.
So Donna was asking, can you give us an example of pre-Scrum techniques?
I just gave you two, trios and AAA. The other interesting thing is when you do continuous journaling. So this continuous journaling we're doing in the NHS at the moment about lessons learned, is we're getting loads of stuff out of that which can produce better software. But nobody would think about it in a review or an interview. It's because we're capturing at the time of the experience. Yeah. So that's the third one. Yeah, and going to JCon's a good system. Yeah, the minute somebody says, you're right, but if you're really good at it, it doesn't happen, you've got a method which doesn't scale. All right, so the amount of really experienced systems analysts who've worked in multiple industry sectors and really understand modern code is so limited that you can't build your system based on that. And the thing I always say to people is the army never tries to recruit people who are above average. I mean, I see this executive say, I mean, bloody David Cameron said this. He said, we want every school in Britain to be above average, which rather indicates his wasn't in mathematical ability, if nothing else, right? The reality is military people always recruit people who are sub-average and through process make them perform well above anybody else. Yeah, and that's what we need to start to design. And say the agile movement is all about the ideal, it's not about the real. I mean, that's really ironic given what it says it is. Yeah, but it doesn't actually work with people as they are. It tries to work with people as they think it should be. And it makes some fundamental errors. I mean, the amount of agile people who talk about everybody being aligned with common goals and common objectives. Well, in evolutionary terms, that's a total bloody disaster. Because it destroys variety in the system, you get no evolution, the system isn't resilient. Yeah, this is where we talk about coherent heterogeneity rather than homogeneity. Okay? And the point is about heterogeneity is that you need the variety of different users and different executives. And you need naivety in the system as well. Naivety is a great technique for discovering things. Yeah? Any more on that? Yeah, it's not just about trying, it's something else about, I mean, there's some research on this. I don't buy this completely. But there's one company, and they've done some research on this, which says 70% of learning comes from informal networks, 20% from experience, and 10% from training. Now, I think that's a bit extreme, but if I look at the original research I did in IBM, which gave rise to Cynefin back in the 1990s, is informal networks are more important than formal systems. Yeah, informal networks are far more powerful. So about 60 to 70% of activity took place in informal networks, which then use the formal system as a means of presenting data. Yeah, and the training obsession on IT is problematic because there's this belief, you go on a course, you fill out a multi-choice questionnaire, you read some slides, you answer some questions, you're then certified in something, right? So we over-focus on training and we under-focus on experience and interaction. Yeah, and again, training focuses on it trains people as individuals. It doesn't train people as teams or as crews. Right? And crews actually are not the same thing as teams. Crews are capable of performing well above the capability of the individuals. But this over focus on individual skills is actually really bad science. Yeah, sorry, Jacob, we're just going to disagree on this, all right? Alignment on outcomes with regular spiral learning produces conformity, lack of diversity, and systems which won't be resilient long term. Sorry, don't agree. Any more?
Any more burning questions from the group?
Can I just unmute and talk? This is Jay. Hi, Dave. So how do you get people working together to a goal that's coherent rather than conflicting directions of work?
You don't have a goal, you have a sense of direction. So let me give you the example I normally give, all right? So in Wales, there are 4 professional rugby teams. Yeah? The best of them is Cardiff Blues, who are a highly civilized team, right? Always play fair, yeah, but we suffer bad referees and yeah, we're good guys, right? And there's those bastards down the road in Llanelli, bunch of tin men, all right? Totally fucking disgraceful, cheat all the time, yeah, you can't trust them, they're foul bastards, all right? But when the English arrive, we're Welsh. Right? Now that's coherent heterogeneity. We're different, but we can be the same at a different level. Yeah, and that's what you actually need in teams. You need that ability.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's what
I'm referring to.
And
it's
it
at the
doesn't
abstract
happen by
level.
setting goals. It starts by what you need in complexity is a direction of travel, not a goal. Yeah. And the interesting thing is you can agree, it's easier to agree a direction of travel by agreeing where you won't go rather than where you will go. Right? So you can very quickly, we do this with negative stories, right? So, for example, I mean, you're old enough to have children, all right? Do you, when you read them bedtime stories, were they Janet and John stayed at home, did what mummy and daddy said, took part in the daily stand-up and cleared the backlog every day? Does anybody do that? No, it's Janet and John went into the bloody woods on their own against mummy's and daddy's instruction and met evil things. We have a happy ending, yeah? all human storytelling traditions teach through stories of failure, not stories of success. So why do we focus on best practice when worst practice is more useful? Now, literally, we build worst practice systems for companies because people enjoy it, right? We're malicious gossips by evolutionary necessity. So actually defining a sense of direction by saying, well, we don't want to go there and we don't want to go there and we don't want these sort of things to happen, leaves open emergent possibilities that you wouldn't otherwise get. So it's that sense of direction. In complexity, you start journeys, you don't try and achieve goals. And software has got to be a journey that the company enters onto. The capability of technology is such these days that it can actually transform companies or it can destroy companies. And there are basic principles like distributed databases. Yeah. I mean, anybody who's been in IT for ages knows a centralized database is not bloody secure. Why the hell they're doing it on tracing, I don't know. It's 101 stuff. I remember doing an alternative design for the patient record system in the UK. We said people carry their records with them in chips on their wrist, and we invest in common reader technology, and that would have worked, right? So there are things we know which we're not training users to understand. So we sometimes make IT this magical, mysterious stuff, yeah? We don't make it ordinary enough, but we're increasingly getting articulate users. One of my champions in the EU was actually put in charge of the whole of technology for the European Union. And he wasn't a technologist because they've had enough of IT professionals running IT. And you're seeing more of those sort of patterns coming through. So I think we need to entangle IT with users, with futures, with customers. At the moment, we keep these separations. We keep these linear processes with these gates. We need to radically entangle them, yeah, so that we can see which structures are actually capable of exploitation.
Yeah, I always see IT as automating human intention, human value. So it's the focusing on the human value, not on the technology. But of course, you need the technologies to enable it, such as distributed databases.
And it's you know, technology as enabler is one thing. Technology as replacement is something completely different. And a lot of the drivers for technology investment has not been to augment human decision making, but to replace humans. And I remember, I made this one of the master. I withdrew my daughter from psychology A-level and got her to do sociology instead. Now, just to be clear, I'm a philosopher. Philosophers hate sociologists, yeah? Yeah, they tried to replace us in the 18th century and they've been getting it wrong ever since, all right? So this is a big decision. But a textbook basically said, you know, the principle, the understanding of psychology is that the human brain is a limited processing information capacity device. So I pulled her out of the course because silicon isn't carbon, right? I go back to the Horta in Star Trek at this point, right? It's very different. You can't get a mind melt, right? Basically, human beings and computers make decisions in radically different ways, right? And actually, human beings are really good. If you use IT to augment weak signal detection, human beings can pay attention to things. That's what we do called anticipatory triggers. You trigger human beings as to what they should pay attention to. You don't tell them what is happening, right? So there's a whole thing on AI here that we need to start to think about, which also includes a lot of our work, for example, is generating training data sets. Because the big problem with AI is the training data sets. And if I'm going to get really polemical about this, most AI systems have been written by young males who've never had female contact on the west coast of the United States who take Ayn Rand seriously after puberty, which is a sign of mental derangement, right? And you know, you can see that in the Google recruitment and everything else. So one of the things I'm interested in is how do you create more cognitive diversity in the training data sets for AI? Yeah. And that actually gets rid of the black box element and makes it more visible to people. And again, that's an architectural issue. I'm focusing on making the training visible, not the output. Because if people understand the input, they'll accept the output. But if you just give them an output without understanding the input, you've got a problem.
Hey, Dave, got to ask you sort of a side question with your sort of hand flap there. Have you ever read Ayn Rand's Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology and Her Theory of Concepts?
Yeah, regrettably, I need to tell you, all right, that I was banned from, there was an ARBCOM decision on Wikipedia, and I was banned from editing the Ayn Rand page for 3 months, but allowed to contribute constructively to the talk page. But the Randonistas all got blocked for a year or permanently. So those of us who were anti-Rand thought it was an acceptable sacrifice. I had to read some of the most worst philosophy and some of the worst novels I've read in my life to take part in that. She's not a philosopher. She's only accepted as a philosopher by institutions in the state funded by the foundations to support the institute.
Yeah. I have to disagree. I've been involved for 58 years, and I find it's tools for thinking, and the stuff you bring up are tools for thinking. That's the job of philosophy. The trick is to ask the right questions to recognize them.
Well, remember Ayn Rand's speech to West Point, where she said Arabs and Native Americans weren't human because they had no concept of property and therefore it was legitimate to commit genocide.
Nah, I don't think that's what she said.
That's exactly what she said. I can give you the references and the quotes.
I know the references, and I actually know the person, or did know the person.
Fight.
I was going to say, I think you two gents are going to have to take this one offline.
I think we need to have a beer sometime, someplace.
Oh, that would be tremendous.
Socially distanced.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, any more? As we come to 8 o'clock. Just looking at things. I don't think, I mean, what we're focused on is what's called human metadata. So we get human beings to interpret their own narratives. And so basically that gets there, right? So the whole idea is high abstraction human metadata with raw data is key. If you just get AI to interpret raw data, it doesn't get it wrong. I wrote a blog post on this recently, which you can find quite swiftly. It talks about, and I was thinking about Donald Trump when I came up with the title. So it goes big data, thick data, and rich data. Yeah. So big data is the classic big data stuff where you have huge volume data. Yes, there's a few grins on that. Thick data is ethnography. Rich data is what we do, which is self-ethnography, which means we can scale at volume and use anecdotal data. So that blog post is worth looking at. That's the data which we use for training data sets. So you increase the human element in primary interpretation, and you do that with abstract metadata. And I've been in IT all my life. Metadata is one of the most important things. And people assume the metadata is contained in the data. It isn't. Yeah. Yeah, somebody found the blog quite fast. I'm impressed on that. And in response to PR, I'll make another comment. This is going to upset some people. People who are owned by cats understand complexity. People who own dogs never will.
What if you own both?
You've got to think about that one for a bit, all right?
What if you own both, Dave?
Well, yeah, well, that's probably okay because I've yet to see a dog survive a cat household without becoming a servant, so that's all right. Dogs are natural servants anyway. There's a lovely Rudyard, if you haven't read Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories. Anybody read those? Okay. My favorite is the cat who walked by himself and all places are alike unto him. Mm-hmm. So the cat wants the benefit of humans, but it doesn't want the subservience. So it tricks the humans. And it's just a brilliant story. It finishes off, I am the cat who walks by himself and all places are alike unto me. And that's just a wonderful statement.
Somebody posted recently that if cats can't give you COVID-19, but they totally would if they could, which made me laugh.
Yeah. Okay. Any more?
No cats, no dogs, just two daughters, and they're French.
Yeah, I'm making a semi-serious point on this. Yeah, that you can't train a cat. If you train a cat, it doesn't work. All right. People who put cats in collars don't understand cats. Yeah, basically, you have to live. It's a co-evolutionary process between you, the cat, and the various dead animals that get brought in every night. Right. I took a a rabbit out of the dining room the other night, which had obviously died of a heart attack. There were no scars on it, but they've been playing with it all night, right? So you have this sort of co-evolutionary process where nothing is completely certain, but sometimes you understand boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, something very similar. You have Peter Nietzsche. Rings a bell for you?
No.
He's a German philosopher, thinker. He explains everything based on the religions, how Catholics behave and all.
Well, no, actually, there is something on that. I mean, there's a big divide between social atomists and communitarianism. So social atomism is the belief that the individual is primary and everything else is subservient, of which the most extreme is libertarianism, right? Social atomism, communitarianism, which is not communism, says that human beings are primarily defined by the social structures from which they evolve and are interdependent with them. Now, the cognitive neuroscience now backs up, collectivism as against to atomism, but Roman Catholicism is actually a collectivist religion. Protestantism is an individualist religion. So you actually see that come across. And I got summoned to the Vatican for heresy when I was a young Jesuit. I'm quite proud of it. I got summoned for heresy, right? I was number 98 on a list of 100. And we were threatened with the candles being stubbed out in the Sistine Chapel if we didn't conform, for basically saying that Hinduism, Catholicism, and Marxism were ontologically identical, so could be combined. But Protestantism and capitalism were ontologically incompatible, so couldn't be combined. And I still believe that, to be honest, all right? But it got me into a lot of trouble with Ratzinger.
Did you confirm? Because I can't imagine it.
That was when I decided I just failed the test of obedience with the Jesuits, which took a lot less than before IBM found it. Yeah.
Makes a great T-shirt, though.
Yeah, I failed the test of obedience. We should have that made up, actually. That's a good T-shirt for a conference. Yeah. I expect that at Lean Agile Scotland. Yeah.
I will make it.
Next time you invite me, I want that T-shirt.
I will make it for us. We can walk around with it.
Okay, we had one from John earlier that said to not stifle emergence, platforms to support virtual economies will need to satisfy two conflicting requirements. Firstly, they will need to be trustworthy, secure, incorruptible, and therefore to some extent centralized. Secondly, they must offer a high degree of freedom, be hackable, subvertible, and to a greater extent decentralized. Would you agree?
I think it would be wonderful if it was true, but it ain't going to happen, right? The economy is quite interesting at the moment. I'm in a couple of think tanks on this because I've been trying to get funding for years, and I think it's now coming through to actually properly invest how gifting works. All right, now I did this original work in Northern Australia in the 70s with Australian Indigenous people, and gifting isn't an exchange. It's really important to understand. Gift is a membership fee. It's an acceptance. You don't get back what you put in. Yeah, if you don't gift, you're not part of the community. You die, because that's what happens in those communities. Now, one of the things that COVID has taught us, I mean, the famous Theresa May stuff about there is no magic money tree. Well, I mean, countries are planting magic money forests all over every available landscape at the moment, all right? We now know that money isn't a limiting factor. Right? There's never been any reason why we shouldn't give free at the point of entry healthcare, which Ayn Rand needed in later life because she had to take the money for cancer treatment because libertarian doesn't work under those circumstances. Sorry, couldn't resist that one, right? There's no reason why we shouldn't give free at the point of entry healthcare, education. Yeah, it's just we choose to ration it with money. Now, I think one of the interesting things, and Kate Ramworth, who I know well, is working on some of this with donut economics. If you haven't read that, do it. There's Carla down at UCL, is the whole concept of how do you create a gifting economy? And that's not blockchain, because blockchain is another means of exchange. The minute you have a means of exchange, who controls the means of exchange gets more important than what the exchange represents. Yeah. And at that point, you're into this concept of fractal and entangled. So at what level of different communities do you interact in different ways? And it's no, I mean, I went walking on Sunday and the Severn Bridge has got a roadblock on it. Now, I've always wanted to, exclude the English from Wales, but I didn't expect to be on the other side of the border when it happened, all right? Yeah, so I walked up to the top. There's one walk in the Brecon Beacons, which is in England. So I walk up and look at the Promised Land, walk along the border, walk down again. Right. But if you look at it, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland have been taking a completely different approach to England. Yeah, and that's always been a divide. Yeah, the fragmentation is increasing. And I've argued this in the European quite a few times, that if you look at Europe, it's the 13th century cultural units which still have stability. Yeah, if you look at it, Languedoc is not the same thing as Paris, is not the same thing as Brittany. Yeah, Bavaria is different from Swabia, everything is different from Prussia. Yeah, basically those units which are about the right cultural size, if something goes over 5 to 7 million, it loses cultural coherence. So I think one thing a lot of us are interested in is within cultural coherence, you can get agreement on what should happen. Yeah, so things like finance and defense need to be supernatural these days. It's why to be honest, the EU is critical to Britain, because it's the only counter we got to Russia and China and the States. Yeah, Britain's on its own just becomes a loose football between all three. So at that level, you need the transnational stuff, but you need this more local type decision making. And again, I think technology can help that. But it's not going to be things like, I've seen people try and use technology to do explicit voting systems, right? That doesn't work. You need to understand dispositional states, not explicit choices. So people are trying to replicate the existing system of democracy, which was never evolved for this level of problem. Yeah. I mean, COVID is just a gift, because what's going to come afterwards is even worse. It's interesting. I'm working with Extinction Rebellion at the moment, probably better not say too much about that. But one thing a lot of us are trying to do is to make the connection between COVID and global warming. Because if we don't make that connection across the whole population, the opportunity is missed.
I did that in my talk in Agile London tonight.
Yeah,
it's critical. That's what we ended on. Yeah.
So we're working on that at the moment. So you watch out on the blog, because we'll be pushing out some public stuff on that shortly.
Great, happy to help.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
We're all getting political now, so that's cool. Right?
Always good to say, yeah, it's took a political twist. I'm not surprised, Dave, if I'm honest.
Everything. Well, I mean, the point is technology is political. Look at what Cummins is doing with it.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, at the moment, the big data guys, and that includes the behavioral economics, the helping guys, are actually quite dangerous. Yeah. So technology is not being used there for social good. It's being used for social determinism.
You think that'll be affected by the McNamara fallacy?
I'm nervous about that, all right? I think, as I spent 8, 9 years of my life studying indigenous cultures. And there's a huge amount in that we can learn from. It's in a more natural state. Now, you can't just take it across intact. I'm not into the New Age fluffy bunny. Here's the talking stick I got when I sat in meditative smoke circles in, that they're crap, right? And nobody I know in indigenous community take it seriously. That's for the white guys just to fool them, right? But basically, there's a whole body of stuff about the size of a social unit, the obligations of a social unit, and they think collectively. And I think that's where we've got to get to. Yeah, you've got to think collectively about situations, not individually. Otherwise, it's not going to work. That was fun. Anybody else want to say anything else?
Collective thinking isn't the same as consensus either, is it?
No, absolutely not. And that's my point about heterogeneity, right? And you know the way that works, all right? I mean, the standard thing between the Welsh and the Irish, whoever wins the rugby match, the standard phrase is, okay, you beat us, but go and beat the English.
Yeah.
And I got rugby shirts for every nation that plays against the English, every nation, right? So I can wear it when it's appropriate, right?
I've got lederhosen.
But that's an example of a negative reinforcement. But I can sit on a rugby terrace with a bunch of English fans. Now, when we beat them 33, it was fun because they took off their white shirts and said, "We'll just enjoy the rugby." That was highly enjoyable. but you can have a conversation. And I still remember coming back from a Cardiff Munster match at the Arms Park, and we were all, I mean, they cheated in the final 3 minutes and got a penalty they shouldn't have got. So we're talking about this all the way back. And then at Newport, a bunch of Southampton football fans got on the train and everything changed. Yeah. They were singing Always Shit on the Welsh Side of the Bridge. There was a Muslim woman there. They started to get into abuse. It was just appalling, right? I recorded it and sent it to West because the train guard just ran away from it and just left us all exposed in the carriage, right? But the difference was key, all right? What you got there is nasty, vicious conflict, yeah? And the other, you had, okay, we're different, we don't agree with each other, but we can have a conversation, yeah? But it wasn't bland conformance. It wasn't sort of, we're all going to be nice to each other. Because also, on the rugby pitch, I mean, I was a bloody number 7 forward, you know. First time I played an English team, I broke the fly half's leg and I got a medal for it. Yeah, but I still go out for dinner with him every year on the anniversary because we met again 10 years later. That's rugby, right? And that's what you need. You need that sort of way of thinking about things. Yeah. Anybody read the Steersman series? It's really good, Steerwoman series, really good science fiction. Yeah, it's basically about tribes which conflict and don't conflict, and the steerswomen are the people who can only tell truth. Worth reading.
We've got another few minutes of questions, Dave, Babs, and then I'll bring proceedings to a close. So if there's any final burning questions, and then now's your time, folks. Now's your time. I have to say it's been another highly memorable session. We reflected on this one for a while.
And it's not over yet.
It's not over yet. And I was loving the rugby analogies, and it made me think about.
I didn't have time to get a gin and tonic before it started.
Did you know?
Well. Right. I came straight out of a masterclass into
Sorry to hear that. But no, I was thinking about what you were saying about the football, and I'm thinking the old sort of adage of like being a Scots fan, and you know, everybody understands that we support Scotland and anybody who's playing England.
Yeah, that's it. And New Zealand have a T-shirt. We support New Zealand and anybody who's playing against Australia, unless it's England.
The plot thickens.
That's pseudocode.
Certainly is.
Yeah, it's a good job the Six Nations was over at one point because I was going to have to support England against Ireland to give Wales a chance of winning the championship. So I feel that I was saved from this by an act of God. And if we replay the championship in the autumn, we get another chance at it. But,
anyone else? Last chance to ask any questions?
Cool. Well, I shall go to the private bar. Well, one thing is, everybody knows I like gin, so every conference organizer gives me gin. So I have 3 cupboards full of gin bottles. I have more than I can legitimately consume in my lifestyle. So we have a thing called Ginevin Day every December. Where the whole team come to my house to reduce the gin supplies. All right?
You didn't show me any of that.
So Ginevin is a good word, all right? Ginevin Day. All right?
Ginevin going to give you up.
Cool. Okay, guys.
Are we good?
Yeah.
I think we're good, Dave. I think we'll let you off there. I think you've done another tremendous job. I think you even topped last session's Q&A session. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. No, thanks again. Brilliant session.
Okay. See you guys.
Really enjoyed it. And just hang on for 2 seconds because we know you've just come off a class. So yeah, thanks again. Brilliant. But we will share the recording, folks. We will get you the previous sessions one as well as soon as we can. And our thanks again to Dave. He's been an excellent guest and brilliantly fielded all of your questions. Really impressed with the cat and dog chat and the rugby analogies. I must say, I think those will live on long in the memory. So I think you just join me in thanking Dave for his time again this evening. He's a very busy man, so I think that's just a round of applause.
Always a pleasure, guys. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Definitely earned. And next week, just a couple of community shout outs quickly for you all. So in our next session next week, just closing out the month, we have Mike Burrows. our good friend Mike, he's joining us for his session on right to left. So that's sure to be another great session for you all. And we've already started to put some other ones in the diary as well, so please look out for all of those. And at the beginning of June, we'll be joined by Tony Ponton, who'll be doing a great session on PI planning, which Babs will be hosting, and he's joining us from Australia, so that's another cracker to look forward to there. And just a couple of other related shout outs for our friends at Agile Scotland. So you'll have seen that they're doing their design box sessions every week now, so that's a weekly series that they're doing. So there is one this Friday if you're interested in that. That session's on remote facilitation, so that's sure to be of value given the current climate. And their conference is now also open, and the early bird tickets are on sale. They've been kind enough to offer our community a 15% discount, so we did post about that in our LinkedIn group. So if that's of interest to you, do go there and have a look and take advantage of that. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've certainly enjoyed hosting it, and most memorable session, and we hope we will see you again. Brilliant. Thank you all. Thanks for joining us.
Guys.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.